Good evening. My name is Pete Dixit. I'm the Executive Director for Facilities Management and Strategic Planning for Baltimore County Public Schools. I want to welcome you to first Community Engagement Forum to support the Northeast High School study. As you will recall, last year, a consultant conducted a comprehensive study of all Baltimore County Public Schools called My IPASS, which stands for Multi-Year Improvement Plan for All Schools. This study provided recommendations to improve the physical condition, space utilization, and educational adequacy of all schools in Baltimore County. The next step in the process was to further evaluate specific options for high schools in the northeast part of the Baltimore County and in southeast part of the Baltimore County. We have selected a consultant, Samaha, consistent with the board policy and the Rule 3250. All of the information that we have about Northeast high schools, including previous studies that have been done by different consultants and any other information, we have shared with Samaha to conduct their work. Using this information and combined with their experience, Samaha has created a list of potential options to improve facility capacity, condition, and adequacy issues. And Samaha will share with you those options tonight. Consistent with the desire of the superintendent, county executive, and school board, community participation is vital to this process. We want to maintain transparency as much as we can. We encourage your participation and feel free to submit your ideas now and in chat box. In the interest of time, we encourage that any questions or feedback you have during the presentation, put it in the chat box. When presentation is complete, there'll be a chance for Samaha, for us, and my team to answer questions in the next meeting, and they'll be posted on the website. If there are routine questions that we can answer now, we'll be able to communicate with you tonight. With that, I request Samaha to start their presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everyone's time they're spending with us here this evening. My name is Tom Lee. I'm a principal with Samaha, and I have with me Nick Wilson, a civil engineer with MK Consulting. We appreciate the opportunity to be here and serve you and the Baltimore County Public School System. The purpose of why we're here, as Mr. Dixon mentioned, is to take the next steps from the My IPASS process. Well, we'll be providing some options and particular sites for how to relieve capacity in the Northeast planning area. In this background, the My IPASS system made recommendations to increase capacity at a number of students, or a number of schools for students, and these included Kenwood, Loch Raven, Overlea, Parkville, and Perry Hall high schools. So the My IPASS had really two parts, and in the first part we'll be dealing with the third goal here, which is the additions to the Loch Raven school for a capacity increase through addition. And then the next part is both options 1A and 1B, and this really gets to the crux of our presentation. Trying to determine whether we should be building additions to multiple schools or potentially building new schools within that Northeast planning area. We have 5 options to start with tonight, and I want to start by mentioning that while we have 5 options that we're going to begin with, we also want to reach out and see if there's options that we haven't considered yet. So we're looking for that information from the community to mention spaces that they think may be appropriate for us to consider as well. These are by no means a limit for what we're able to consider. But the first option we are presenting is a new school on a new site at Hiss Avenue. The second option is a new site at Belmont Park. The third is additions to 3 schools at Perry Hall, Overlea, and Kenwood. The fourth option is additions at both Loch Raven and again at Overlea High School. And the fifth would be to build a new replacement high school on the Loch Raven site. To orientate you in the Northeast planning area showed here in orange, we've listed all of the school sites that could be impacted by these capacity improvements. And to run through the options here, the Hiss Avenue site shown in red in the center, and option 2 is the Belmont Park site. Options 3, the Perry Hall, Overlea, and Kenwood sites are all represented. Option 4 is again 2 additions at Loch Raven and Overlea. And then the fifth option is the Loch Raven site at the north end. This would be the replacement school. And this graphic just shows a combination of all of those different options for your reference. So with that, let's kind of dive a little deeper into each school site. The first being the Hiss Avenue site, which is about equidistant between the existing Parkville and Overlea sites, and it's right off the 695 and Route 1 interchange. Zooming in on that site, you can see it's currently the location of a county park maintenance facility right there in kind of the center east portion of the site, as well as there's some community gardens up in that north corner. You can notice it's a fairly wooded and steeply sloping site, and some of those dashed in red lines across the bottom demonstrate the stream buffer setbacks. While this site is very close to the interchange of 695 and Route 1, its proximity to that interchange and the stream buffers dictate that we'll most likely be looking at accessing that site solely out of the Hiss Avenue neighborhood. So something to consider there. We have about a little over half the acreage is developable based on the steep slopes and the forested areas and stream buffers. And then moving on, this school, for both new schools, would be looking at a state-rated capacity of about 1,000 students. The next new construction site potential is the Belmont Park site. And you can see its location to the northeast of the site we just spoke about. Zooming in here, we can notice that it's named after the parks that's there currently. The Belmont Park site has ball fields, pavilions, and parking supporting that site. It also runs across on the east border is a large power easement, and then there is another stream buffer that somewhat diagonally bifurcates the site where the southeast corner would have to be accessed by a bridge if that were to be developed. Here we would be coming off of the Walther Boulevard to access the site. Again, it's steeply sloped, fairly wooded, and more than 50% of the site could be developed, again with a 1,000 student state-rated capacity potential. Then in option 3, we show on one slide the Perry Hall, Overlea, and Kenwood sites. You can see their proximity to each other. And starting with Perry Hall, we can just go right into a tighter view of this school. This is one of the larger schools for capacity's sake in the Northeast planning area. And we have to recognize that if we were to build additions for capacity to any of these schools, with the addition being the option, we'd also need to look at the core spaces so that we make sure by adding student capacity we don't tax the core spaces like the library, the cafeteria, or the gymnasium. So in each of these addition schemes, we'd be looking further into what core spaces would have to be improved. The next is Overlea, which is really a medium-sized school. And here, the same sort of situation. We would be building additions and increasing core areas for capacity. This school uniquely has somewhat of a stepped grade on the site, so we'd have to take those into considerations where we build the additions to make sure all the spaces meet the programs and are accessible. And then the third being the Kenwood High School site. This is again another fairly large high school, and here you can see we would have to find locations to build those additions as well as to accommodate those core spaces. This one's right up against the interstate to the south, so we would be certainly entering it off the north portion of the site as well. Moving on to the option 4, which is both 2 more addition options. The Loch Raven site, if you want to, and then the Overley site again. But the Loch Raven site you can see here. There's plenty of room for additions on this site. Again, this is one of the older schools, and we would be able to build up and renovate some core spaces with this option. And Overley, just like in option 3, we'd be essentially, Overley is in both addition options, so we'd be able to accommodate additions and core space renovations here. And then the 5th option is a little different. It's technically just outside of the Northeast planning area, but we thought there was an opportunity here based on the site. You can zoom in and you can see that while the school is here in one portion of the site, there's plenty of room and access from 2 major roadways where we could construct a completely new school while the existing Loch Raven site retained occupancy, and then remove that school at the end of construction with a larger school to increase the capacity in that manner. So moving on, these are really the options that we've started with. We want to make sure that we hear from you other considerations that we can target. And then we'd also like to hear feedback about what are really the most important decision-making factors for you. Is it distributing the capacity throughout the Northeast planning area? Is it building new construction or additions or renovations? Is one more important than the other? Is the amenities that can be accommodated on a particular site most important? Or things like cost considerations, if there's an economy for one option versus another. Those are the types of things we're interested in, and we'd love to hear more from you. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Paul Taylor. I'm the Director of Strategic Planning for Baltimore County Public Schools. We're now going to start the question and answer session portion of this evening's event. And we are also inviting you to enter your comments, feedback, questions into the chat box that's on your screen. We've received a question on the chat. Where can I find information about possible build sites for this new school? If you visit the BCPS website, you'll be able to find information about the presentation that was made this evening, and you'll be able to see the slides that were presented. We want to acknowledge that we have a number of comments that illustrate some concern about building additions onto existing schools. So we acknowledge that we've received those comments and acknowledge your concerns.
What are considered core spaces, and would all core spaces be included in any renovations additions? Would areas such as health suites, cafeterias, gymnasiums be included? And so for the purpose of the study, we're starting with the main core spaces, and those are the gymnasium, the cafeteria, and the library. Once the projects moved forward beyond the conceptual phase, we'd most likely be looking into more detailed areas such as administration and health suites and such. But for the purposes of establishing a square footage and an overall cost of options for each, at this phase, we're looking solely at the gymnasium, the cafeteria, and the library as a core capacity indicator. Thank you for the question.
Well, we're going to close the question and answer session now. Thank you, Sama, for your presentation. This is going to be an ongoing conversation. It doesn't end here. Please remember to visit the Northeast High School study page on the BCPS website. We've created this site to help keep communities updated the progress of the study. The site will allow you to provide ongoing feedback and comments on this presentation and on the study. The consultant will consider your input as they further analyze the feasibility of the various proposed options. On April 6th, we will hold a second community forum where their analysis will be presented again, and we will ask again for your feedback. This concludes our session for this evening. We thank you for participating. Good night.